For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started. When it comes to mutation accumulation, when it comes to genetic entropy, it's the fact that, and when I say we're becoming more and more mutant every single day, this is on a personal level. The fact that we're accumulating roughly 3 new mutations per cell per day, but most of them have just a very trivial effect on us. But eventually we die to mutation accumulation. But because, as Lena is correctly saying, some are passed on through the germ cell lines, okay? So every single generation, we've lost a little bit of information, okay? Now, we actually have a genome of 3 billion letters. We pass on 3 billion, okay? We get 3 billion from mom, 3 billion from dad. So those mutations, they're very small, very subtle, but they're unselectable. Selection can't see them. Mother Nature can't remove them. Change one letter in a genome of 3 billion, you're not going to have a huge effect, right? It's the accumulation of them over time. They're what's called effectively neutral. Too small of an effect on the organism to actually be seen and noticed by Mother Nature. Selection can't do anything about them. They're virtually unselectable. Now, here's the thing. Genetic entropy assumes that selection will remove the worst deleterious mutations, the most harmful ones, of course, and even amplify a really good beneficial mutation, which are still roughly reductive, okay? Generally reductive. Here's the thing, though. These mutations, you can have a mutation, just a single letter change that can lead to a disease. That person may not live to reproduce. They've essentially been selected out, okay? But the typical mutation, guys, the typical mutation, it's not detectable. Just has a small effect like rust on a car, which Speed loves that analogy so much. But here's the thing I want to point out. Selection acts on phenotype, not genotype. Selection is acting on the level of the organism, the whole individual. I pointed this out to David in our last debate. Guys, we have 100 trillion cells. And guess what? In every single cell, every single one of our cells contains 6 billion nucleotides. Those 6 billion letters are in every cell. So Mother Nature has a job. She has to decide if Luca's body, if Speed of Sound's body, if Brother Will's body is going to be selected or not. Selection is choosing between the whole genome at the organism level. So guess what? Either we're looking at reproduction or non-reproduction, because all selection means is differential reproduction. And there's no type of mechanism that can be provided that can remove these effectively neutral mutations, okay? And it's ridiculous because they're trying to play games. The critics are trying to play games on the fact that selection acts on phenotype in very weird ways. Here's the point. Genes are carried in organisms. Consequently, okay, since genes are carried in organisms, the organism is the target of selection. You can't see each single nucleotide, each generation, and say, we're going to remove that one, it's bad. We're going to keep that one, we'll remove that one. No, we're consistently more and more mutant. And if there's a rebuttal from Speed in the chat, I'd love I'd love to hear what his mechanism is for removing these slightly deleterious mutations. Okay, so let's see. And here's the thing. This redundancy in the genome, okay, the third position codon variation. Walker, in one of his videos, was saying, there are absolutely neutral mutations. Guess what? They now know that these third position codons, okay, there were a lot of the redundancy in the genome. They help slow and speed processes in the cell. So even redundancy, okay, even redundancy in the genome, if it's hit through a mutation, it can have a slightly deleterious effect. Look at the tires on your car. Your tires on your car can take a lot of damage. The treading, for example, but eventually they will wear down. Eventually they will. Okay, so guys, I want to end it here with, I'm going to make this analogy again, okay, guys? Because this whole selection acting on phenotype, not genotype, is incredibly important. And Dr. Dan's argument, okay, what he was saying is the fact that humans, so Dan's saying humans, because speed of sound probably couldn't formulate a coherent argument if his life depended on him. So I'm not going to count on him in the chat. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. Speed's a good guy. Speed's a good guy. So here, okay, this is what Dan says. He says humans exist at an equilibrium right now, okay, what's called a selection mutation balance. And I got to say, you atheists in the chat, you guys make it that much more fun. So you're always welcome. Any arguments, rebuttals, let me know. I like to engage the chat. So this is what they'll say. There's a selection mutation balance. This is what Dan said in his video that he flopped on so bad. Okay, but this won't work because, as I pointed out, each generation has more mutations than the generation before it. And this is why when you look to the bigger picture, okay, when you look at a bigger picture, well, here's the thing. Speed of sound is a problem now because he doesn't want to look at humans because, yes, humans, we have kind of removed natural selection because we have now learned to take care of each other. We have medicine. We took that away. We degenerate even faster. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. There's been papers that have come out now that says almost all mammals have a similar mutation rate, which means all mammals, okay, are degenerating at a similar rate. The fact that many animals, including humans, are not extinct yet, it's because there has not been enough time that has passed. This puts shelf lives on genomes. Now here, I want to point out the fact, okay? Evolutionists, like Speed in the chat, can't really, Speed, I've showed the paper that shows mammals have similar mutation rates. Here's the problem with the evolutionists a lot of the times is they're not even really up to date. Like, for example, when I was debating Mr. Parker, we had to spend 10 minutes disputing the fact that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation. So then I went, found the paper, presented it to him from Michael Lynch himself, who said, yes, 100 new mutations per person per generation. So Speed, I'll get you that paper later. Okay. So here's the thing. When it comes to humans, okay, nobody's going to say that humans are getting better genetically. Okay, now they're going to assume that we are the worst because we have essentially removed natural selection. We live in a variety of environments, and I'll grab Speed of Sound's paper here real quick because he seems legit. And I want to help him. So let's go right here. Boom, boom, boom. So as I'm finding the paper, pulling it up, I want to point out the fact that, okay, here, I think I'm close to it. I don't want to lose my train of thought. I'm going to put it into the chat in 2 minutes. So here's the thing Dan's missing, okay? When we remove, let's take all 8 billion people on the planet, okay? I'm gonna give Speed of Sound in the chat. I'm going to make this easy for him, okay? I'm going to say, okay, we've got 8 billion people on the planet. We're all multiply mutant. We've all accumulated thousands and thousands of mutations. Everybody in this chat, we've all got roughly the same amount of mutations, okay? We've all got more than our parents. And if we reproduce and have kids, they're going to have more than us. It's just basic. So, Speed of Sound. Here you go. You can remove 50% of the worst mutants on the planet. Those that are just slightly more mutant than the rest of us. Okay? Remove them all. Now you're left with 4 billion people. 4 billion people. Did this help? Well, let's see. No, because the 4 billion people, the 50% we have left, because you've wiped out 4 billion, the worst. I'll let you have, it's not realistic, but you can have it. You're still left with 4 billion people, okay, who are still more mutant and have accumulated more mutations than the generations before it. Okay, so you can look to what Dan looks to. Go watch his video, guys. It's an embarrassment. Dan looks to fitness variation, equilibrium of beneficial mutations and negative mutations. They all fail to solve the mutation accumulation problem. Mutation count mechanism fails. It's been falsified through many, many, many numerical simulations that have been published. Now, here's the thing. Including fitness variation, including equilibrium of beneficial mutations and negative mutations, including purifying selection. It does slow down the degeneration process, but it does not solve it. It doesn't solve it. Even if, Dan, there is relative fitness between different individuals within the population, okay, some individuals being better than others, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It still comes down to the same problem and the same result. And I need to point out the numbers have been done. Thousands of simulations have confirmed genetic degeneration. Okay. These are never addressed. Yes, there can be selectable variation within relative fitness. These are all acknowledged. Just saying words doesn't solve the problem. But most people who watch, say, Dan's video, they're blinded and they're hoping for just any response. Any response is going to be good enough for them because they're not even understanding, for the most part, what Dan is saying. They can't see fully. They're just waving it away. Because populations still only get worse naturally and continuously. Remove the worst. Speed, remove the worst. You're still left with populations of people worse off than the previous generation. Isn't that hilarious? How you can even give it to them. Give them a massive amount of purifying selection, and it still doesn't save the day. Okay, so here we go. Right here. A paper. So this paper shows that mutation rates are similar for all mammals when based on mutation rate per year, not per generation, though. Here, look this one up here. It was hard looking that up for you, Speed, while trying to make my point there, but I did it for you. Here we go. Thank you so much, Doki Doki. I appreciate it. Okay, so here's the thing. You can see they got nothing. They got nothing. Okay, they're dead in the water. I want to screen share a really good paper by Paul Price. Okay, Paul Price is the man. And his debate with Dr. Ron Garrett is, to this day, one of my favorite debates. And I'm going to be ending it with his opening statement that I thought he did an amazing job pointing out quotes from, yeah, just toss that into Google. You'll see it there. You'll see it there, Speed. Okay, so let's see. Mutation's good. Where's the part that I want to see? Mutations happen in all life forms and in viruses. In our corrupted, fallen world, the mechanisms that replicate the genetic material from one generation or one cell division to the next are imperfect. Another source of mutation is environmental radiation. Each time we have children, we inevitably pass along some mistakes that were not there before. Now, here's the thing, guys. Even when populations go extinct, okay, like with humans, if we were to just wipe out 4 billion, you're still left with people that are more mutant continuously. You can't solve it. And the fact that the evolutionist science deniers want to fight reality so bad really speaks to the Bible's words when it says that they're willingly ignorant or they're sent a strong delusion. Another source of mutation is environmental radiation. So that helps with Brother Will, his question too, because environment has a huge effect. And in the post-flood world, that would have really, really helped with the decline in age. Each time we have children, we inevitably pass along some mistakes that were not there before. Estimates vary, but a common figure is that each child is born with about 100 new mutations. These are added to the ones already accumulated in previous generations. These mistakes are almost never helpful. You expect to improve an encyclopedia by adding more and more spelling mistakes every time one is printed. The evolutionary literature acknowledges this very clearly. Even the simplest of living organisms are highly complex. Mutations, indiscriminate alterations of such complexity are much more likely to be harmful than beneficial. In summary, the vast majority of mutations are deleterious. This is one of the most well-established principles of evolutionary genetics, and yet you still got evolutionists in the chat that are denying the fact that most mutations are deleterious, supported by both molecular and quantitative genetic data. One estimate is that damaging mutations outnumber helpful ones by 1 in a million. And even that one helpful one you get, when you examine it, okay, when you look at the genotype, guess what? It's reductive. So it's still not taking things forward. Even most of the beneficial mutations turn out to break things rather than make things. It's much easier to break things down than build them up. Neutral mutations. Some people, especially those with scientific backgrounds, believe that most mutations are neither good nor bad. They believe the vast majority of mutations are neutral. This is a major misconception. Given how important the information coded in DNA is for living things, it is easy to see that most random changes are going to have some effect, and most of these will be bad. They will not simply do nothing. From a scientific paper on the topic, it seems unlikely that any mutation is truly neutral in the sense that it has no effect on fitness, right? It's going to have some effect on genotype. All mutations must have some effect, even if that effect is vanishingly small. Thanks so much, Doki. I appreciate it. The heart of the hour. I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate it. It's all for the glory of God, guys. So if there's any, I always say, if there's any recommendations or there's any videos you want to see debunked or anything like that, let me know. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of articles coming out, a couple new books too for the new year, and a lot of solid interviews and discussions for you guys. So the party's just getting started. We are not going anywhere anytime soon. Sorry, Team Dodgeball. While there are essentially no mutations that are strictly neutral, mutations can be so minor in their effects that they're effectively neutral. Geneticist Motu Kimura created a new model where effectively neutral mutations were a huge proportion of the total. Anytime people say that genetic degeneration, guys, is not recognized, just know they don't know what they're talking about, and they're almost not even worth debating. He discovered that these mutations cause a general decline in fitness over time. This term fitness is often used in confusing and circular ways, though. Despite this, Kimura never questioned the notion of evolution. He took it on faith that occasional mega beneficial mutations would cancel out the effect of this gradual decline. Guys, the critics, like Jackson Weed in his video, they don't even look to see that Kimura just said these things in hopes that, yes, mega beneficial mutations would counterbalance the damage due to low impact deleterious mutations. But guess what? No, because the beneficial mutations, when they do happen, they're too rare. And secondly, they're still reductive. And thirdly, and most importantly, simulations have been done where they looked at mega beneficial mutations that were truly supposed to be helpful to counterbalance the damage. And guess what? Genetic degeneration is still inevitable. Thousands of mutations have confirmed this. Evolutionists are dead in the water. They're done. They got nothing. Whether such a small rate of deterioration in fitness constitutes a threat to the survival and welfare of the species, not to the individual, is a moot point. But this will easily be taken care of by evolutionists say the darndest things and ask the darndest questions just by looking at Speed of Sound's latest question, guys. But here's the thing. Laughter is the best medicine, and they give me a good laugh on a daily basis. So here's a quote from, this is Kimura. This will be taken care of by adaptive gene substitutions that must occur from time to time. But there is no evidence to justify Kimura's wishful speculation, where it's all about imaginative speculation with these guys. The evidence shows the opposite. Given enough time, organisms will eventually succumb to the weight of the damaging mutations that accumulate gradually and go extinct. In fact, a paper presented by Sanford and others at a symposium on information at Cornell University demonstrated that lots of such high-impact beneficial mutations would actually hasten extinction. They strongly interfere with selection for or against all low-impact mutations, which makes the problem of genetic entropy worse. What about natural selection? So here's a big one. Evolutionists will sometimes try to rebut these ideas by saying things like, if a mutation is damaging, it will be weeded out by natural selection. See, here's the thing. We understand selection, guys, is going to remove the worst, most harmful, deleterious mutations. We're not against that. See, here's the thing. When these evolutionists, when you get them into live debate or you argue with them over it, they have very unsophisticated, unintelligent, and oversimplified arguments, okay? Because they have a very simplistic view of reality because they want so badly there to not be a creator. This oversimplified view of selection is drilled into biology students relentlessly in classrooms all around the world. They're just repeating what they've heard and blindly believed, right, guys? And it is greatly misleading because for most mutations, it is totally wrong. Natural selection, a straightforward, real process. This is what I said earlier, guys. It essentially just means differential reproduction. Some members of a population will reproduce more than others. Therefore, the traits that are possessed by the ones reproducing the most are going to become the most common in the population over time. The power of natural selection has been carefully measured. So guys, does natural selection have limits? Can it actually solve the degeneration process? The answer is no. For selection to be able to see the mutation, it must be strong enough to select. Doki doki, thanks so much. Hope you guys are having a good night. Nice to see that even at, 6:15. It's been a good night though, guys. I hope that we're getting a lot done and everybody's having fun. So here's what's important, guys, okay? For selection to see the mutation, it must be strong enough to affect reproduction by killing the individual before it can reproduce or by causing sterility or a significant decline in fertility. Thus, natural selection cannot see. So here's the problem, guys. How do you remove what it cannot see? Montaz, we're almost done, brother. We're almost done. I know. I need to sleep too. Okay, so let's see. Here's the thing. I'm so OCD with this that when I've got my checklist of things I want to do, I can't finish the streams till we're done. But we're almost done, I promise. We're leaving no stone unturned for these evolutionists. Just another fatal blow to them. So natural selection cannot see a nearly neutral mutation because on its own, the negative effect of the individual mutation is very tiny, far too small to cause any appreciable difference in reproduction. As errors accumulate with each generation, eventually their collective effect is very damaging. It is easy to see that selection does not weed out most mutations. We all have hundreds of mutations our ancestors did not have. Remember, guys, we've got more mutations than our parents and more mutations than our grandparents. Yet most people have no trouble becoming parents and passing on their genes. This is why this whole Erica argument, where most of them, all they can do, you got to redefine fitness. No, they just don't understand that which is common sense, a difference between an absolute fitness and a reproductive fitness. Because guess what? Most people, no matter how mutant they are, we all have accumulated so many mutations. Guess what? We have no problem having kids for the most part. Okay, there's a lot of mutations that are harmful enough, but do not stop somebody from reproducing. Like, I don't know why this is so difficult to understand for the evolutionists, okay? A lot of genetic mistakes, both old and new ones, don't stop people from having more kids and passing on the good and the bad. Only the really, 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 really detrimental mutations are actually going to stop true reproduction. Natural selection only works on individuals. Forced to acknowledge that natural selection is blind to nearly neutral mutations, a common evolutionist response is, and this is your main one you're going to see from your Dans of the world, once the accumulating damage from the mutations becomes significant, natural selection will start to remove them. That's the argument, guys, but this fails to understand the problem. Natural selection can only weed out individual mutations as they happen. Once mutations have accumulated enough to be a real noticeable problem, they are then a problem in the entire population. This is common sense. This is empirical, guys. Not just in an individual here or there. I mean, that's ridiculous. The whole population cannot be selected away except by going extinct. Remember, there's limitations. You can't select away the whole population. You can't select away too many. Now you got a small population that are going to be highly inbred and accelerate genetic degeneration. In short, if the world were even several 100,000 years old, remember, this puts shelf lives on genomes. This whole argument that you'll see from people like Speed, where, well, we're not extinct yet, or point to a certain animal, they're not extinct yet. Yeah, that's because there hasn't been as much time as the evolutionists say. This puts shelf lives on genomes and makes large-scale evolution impossible. Genetic entropy means that we would have long since become extinct. This demonstrates that it is a biblical creation model, not evolutionary theory, that matches up to genetic reality. And it highlights the dismal future that awaits humanity apart from the intervening work of our Creator God. Our hope is in Christ, verified by thousands of numerical simulations. I'm going to just say this for speed. You can invoke whatever you want. Lots of junk DNA, lots of purifying selection, mega beneficial mutations. You can say genomes just change, which is ridiculous to just say, to wave away the data. You can look to mutation count mechanisms. You can look to natural selection. You can look to anything you want. And guess what? It's all been analyzed. It's all been published. It's all been looked at. It's all been done. And nothing can stop the eventual genetic degeneration of species. That's it. It's been confirmed through numerical simulations. Evolutionists got nothing left. All right, guys. So, because a lot of us want to sleep, I'm going to end it with a video that'll go by quick because I'll play it on 1.5 speed. But Paul Price from CMI did an amazing job against Dr. Ron Garrett. And when Paul Price asked Dr. Ron Garrett, what's the difference between a neutral mutation, essentially, and an effectively neutral mutation? And Ron said he didn't know. And we love Ron here. He's awesome. He's given us so many good debates. I think I'm going to reach out to him for another debate as well. We've just been so busy, I haven't been able to set up the second one with him. So he's awesome. He's given us so many good debates. But in the sense of the science and arguments that he was using, when he said he didn't know the difference, that is precisely the problem these evolutionists have, is they don't understand the difference between a mutation that absolutely has no effect on genotype, nothing, and an effectively neutral mutation that population geneticists speak of, where they have only a slightly deleterious effect. They're still damaging, but the damage is so small that selection can't see it, and so it builds up. And these types of mutations are subject to genetic drift. And populations degenerate over time, slowly but surely. Any actual arguments? Welcome him. I've seen some evolutionists in the chat tonight. No arguments when it came to independent origins and mitochondrial DNA Y chromosome. No arguments on viruses, bacteria, endogenous retroviruses, retrotransposons, ALUs, and no arguments with genetic entropy. Because guess what? They got no answers. They got no arguments. They're denying reality at this point. We love them. We love them. We just don't love their science. So we're going to end with Paul Price. Pay close attention. He does a great job. And he quotes from the secularists themselves who acknowledge the real problem, and they're not quote mining. And once again, speed of sound fails. Everybody give speed of sound a round of applause. Nearly neutral mutations are not damaging. And that is where speed goes wrong, because he thinks the majority of mutations are just that, neutral. When in fact, we now know that for the most part, there's no truly neutral mutation, because all must have even a small effect on genotype, even a small effect on genotype. And that is the fact. That is the fact. Even these third position codons, they're now known to be functional in terms of slowing down or speeding up the cellular processes. And mutations in there, although there's a lot of redundancy, they'll just be so slightly damaging that every time you get a mutation like that, it's just more and more damaging, more and more. So guys, I want to, and here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you want to just give speed, if you want to just give that to speed, well, guess what? That's all been done too. Anything these evolutionists can throw at you to solve the problem, they've all been analyzed, they've all been published, but they don't want to look at these papers. They don't want to examine the numerical simulations. And guess what? They don't want to write up their own critique or do their own numerical simulation and say, hey, this mega beneficial mutation rescue device that I'm looking for, or this rescue device that says most mutations are neutral, I'm not actually going to go publish an analysis of this. No, but guess what? We've already done it all. Thousands of numerical simulations have done this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to share a screen on Dr. Sanford and Robert Carter. This was their response to all these critics. They even mentioned Dan Cardinal by name here. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, we read through this during our last genetic entropy video. We read through a lot of it. But there's a certain part that I want to. If a mutation has any effect at all, from Dr. Sanford, it is because it is affecting some aspect of the organism's biological information system. This is logically true whether a mutation is high impact, moderate impact, or nearly neutral. Random mutations in the genome are just like random letter changes in an instruction manual, or the random flipping of binary bits in computer code. In all these examples, we know for sure that random changes will always lead, but according to Speed, only in the information system that makes life is there changes and mutations, right? Changes in the nucleotide sequence that are just absolutely neutral, just no effect at all, like they never happened. In all these examples, we know for sure that random changes will always lead to a net loss of information, and almost all changes will be deleterious. Waiting for a beneficial mutation or a nearly neutral beneficial mutation is like waiting to win a lottery. It should be obvious to any thinking person that near neutral mutations, like all random changes in code, large or small, will very consistently be harmful. And there is one here that I wanted to go to on, yeah, this is a must-read paper. But there's one here. Yeah, brother Brandon says, Dan has been destroyed by CMI, SFT, and RAMA. Yeah, Dan doesn't have anything else to offer, to be honest with you. Yeah, so all their best objections, they've been dealt with. They've been verified through thousands of numerical simulations. All rescue devices that they could throw, okay? Selection, near neutral mutations, beneficial mutations. There's also the huge problem of selection interference here. Okay. So, I mean, you can put you can even set the parameters at a lot of junk DNA and still see, you're still going to see that mutations accumulate and genomes degenerate. This is it. So so here's Dr. Sanford. Again, they have not, see, and they don't think through their arguments carefully. This is why Dr. Sanford doesn't even take them seriously. There's been no peer-reviewed, published rebuttals. The mutation accumulation problem is most severe in small populations because selection becomes less effective. There are almost 8 billion people alive today, making us one of the largest mammalian populations. Any mammalian population with fewer individuals should be even more subject to genetic entropy than mankind. Clearly, population size is a significant factor in many past extinction events due to mutation accumulation. And mutational meltdown is certainly relevant to all currently endangered species. Most mammals have mutation rates similar to humans. Remember, I gave that paper to Speed earlier. Most mammals have mutation rates similar to humans. It is true that we take care of the old and sick, which may have a limited effect on selection efficiency. Then again, we tend to kill off a lot of people as we fight with each other. So even there seems like there's a balance, guys. Speed of sound's argument fails. It should be obvious that genetic entropy is not limited to mankind. Obvious to people who don't deny science, of course. And here's their junk DNA rescue device. H1N1 paper. Anyways, guys, so we're going to end it here with Paul Price. Listen carefully, make some great points. I highly recommend the debate in full. And we're going to call it a day, guys. We've gone for almost 3 hours. And let me check my checklist. We touched on independent origins, debunking the critics, ERVs, ALUs, viruses, all the goodies, and genetic entropy. Left no stone unturned, guys. So we're going to end it with this. I've been talking for 3 hours straight, guys. So sit back, relax, enjoy. We've addressed all the arguments in the chat. And I hope this has been engaging for everybody. So here we go.
Talking about one simple thing, which is mutations. And that's going to be the main thing that we need to nail down in our debate today. What are mutations and what are they capable of, or what are they not capable of? I'm going to start out by quoting from a renowned mathematician by the name of Ian Malcolm. And he has been quoted as saying, "Ultraviolet radiation is good for life. It's powerful energy. It promotes mutation, change." So now, obviously, notwithstanding the fact that Dr. Malcolm is a fictional character, what he has said there is actually pretty representative of what we would expect from a Darwinian worldview, or from a Darwinian standpoint. What would we expect to see when we look at mutations? Mutations are change, and for evolution to work, change has to happen continuously in all life forms. Change must be good. It must have brought us from a single-celled organism all the way up to human beings, to very complex organisms. So what I'm going to show you today, and what science is showing, is that idea that change is good for life, arbitrary, unplanned change, that is the exact opposite of reality. So the power in Dr. Sanford's argument and the power in the book Genetic Entropy really lies in the fact that he has not only looked at people who agree with him. His argument is based upon the peer-reviewed evolutionary scientific literature. And he bases his points on all these points that secular evolutionists, population geneticists like Dr. Kimura, for example, are willing to admit. And all we have to do is to connect the dots to see where they lead. That's the one thing that the evolutionists are not willing to do themselves. If they did connect the dots, they would be forced to relinquish their faith in evolution and what Dr. Sanford calls the primary axiom, the idea of evolution from a common ancestor. So before I get into making this case, though, I do want to make a brief comment on the idea of creationists quoting evolutionists. Because invariably what happens whenever a creationist like myself quotes from an evolutionist is that we are accused of quote mining, which just simply means quoting something out of context to misconstrue the author's intended meaning. And I will be honest, I have seen that happen before, probably not on purpose. Somebody got a little overzealous or whatever. But I confirm with you today that that is not the case with these citations that I have provided. These citations are in context. And that is what makes them so powerful. It's not that the scientists aren't willing to admit to the dots. It's just that they're not, or they're very rarely willing to connect the dots to show what the implication of this data really is. So I think that actually makes Dr. Sanford's case all that much more powerful, because the people that we are drawing from to make this case don't want us to be right. Now, I am going to simplify Dr. Sanford's case here down to a series of 3 basic premises, which, if we can verify, will lead us to the conclusion of genetic entropy, which is the gradual decline of all, or at least nearly all, forms of life over time as a result of accumulating mutations. Now, first off, we also need to be on the same page. What are mutations? Simply put, mutations are unguided, unplanned mistakes or errors that happen during the replication process, usually of DNA or RNA. Sometimes mutations can also be caused by outside factors like chemicals or ultraviolet radiation, like Dr. Malcolm said. No transcription process is perfect, but life does have built-in processes of error correction to try to weed out the mistakes before they get passed on to the next generation. But in this fallen world that we live in, even these error correction processes are not perfect. And each generation, some typos in the DNA or RNA, some mistakes do get passed on. So we know that our DNA is the blueprint for life. It contains at least a large amount of the total information content that builds our bodies. So we could actually compare this idea to making copies of the blueprints for some very complex machine like a fighter jet, for example. But each time we make a copy, we make little tiny typos, little slight variations. And these aren't planned or anything. It's just little mistakes that happen. And however, unlike with a real fighter jet, evolutionists would have us believe that life has no engineer, has no designer, there was no plan behind it. And in fact, it is these little copying mistakes, these mutations, that are the ultimate origin of the fighter jet to begin with. So as you can see, that is a little bit of a strange idea from the outset. It brings us to our first premise. Premise 1, mutations are the source of the raw material needed to drive evolution. So Heilbronn and his co-authors write in citation number 1, mutations are the ultimate source of genetic variation that natural selection acts upon. Understanding the rate at which mutations arise and the distribution of fitness effects of spontaneous mutations is therefore of central importance to the study of evolutionary biology. So what he basically means by that is mutations are the only game in town for evolution when it comes to the question of novel genetic information. This is where evolutionists go to get the new raw building material for life. If we show that mutations cannot be that source, then the only other option we have on the table is intelligent design or creation. Now, from a purely conceptual standpoint, we can realize some basic things about mutations. For any finely tuned machine like a fighter jet, there are obviously many more ways. If you just go in and arbitrarily make changes to the plans, there are many more ways that you could cause harm to the blueprint than there are ways that you could make arbitrary changes to improve it. And so even if you did accidentally stumble upon an improvement, it's very unlikely to be a large improvement all at once. It's much more likely to be a tiny fine-tuning improvement here or there. So with that, it brings us to our second premise. Premise 2, the vast majority of mutations are damaging, and conversely, almost no mutations are beneficial. Looking at citation number 2, quoting Garish and his co-authors, even the simplest of living organisms are highly complex. Mutations, indiscriminate alterations of such complexity, are much more likely to be harmful than beneficial. And skipping down to citation 4, I'll read from Kitely and Lynch. They write, in summary, the vast majority of mutations are deleterious. This is one of the most well-established principles of evolutionary genetics, supported by both molecular and quantitative genetic data. So, all right, so far, so good. Actually, a lot of evolutionists would be willing to grant these first 2 premises that we've made here. But what they would like to bring into the picture is the idea of natural selection. Now, natural selection is not really a force. It's just an observation about how nature works. There are certain organisms that have more offspring than others, reproduce more competitively or more effectively than others. And so, as a result, the genes that are carried by those organisms are going to filter through the population and eventually become dominant in the population over time. And so we could actually simply call it differential reproduction. That's what natural selection is. And Darwin, of course, had this idea that the idea of natural selection could be responsible for evolution from simple to complex over time, higher and higher in forms. Natural selection is supposed to be able to whittle down all of the negative changes that occur and amplify up all of the positive changes. What we're going to show, and what modern science has revealed, is that too is a hopelessly naive concept. So here's the other thing we have to get clear. It's this word fitness. And I've written on this topic with Dr. Robert Carter, who is a colleague of Dr. Sanford. And unfortunately, just like with the word evolution itself, the word fitness is a slippery and tricky word. It can be used in different places to mean different things. And what I've found, reading through these genetics papers, reading through the literature, I have, and I believe Dr. Sanford has spoken on this too, there's kind of a subtle division of meaning, a nuance of meaning when it comes to fitness. So for clarity, I'm going to divide fitness into 2 separate ideas. The first of those 2 I'll call absolute fitness. Absolute fitness would refer to the biological function of the organism, irrespective of its ability to reproduce. Whereas reproductive fitness would refer to the competitiveness of the organism in reproduction in the population. And I think it's very obvious and in fact self-evident that there are a great many ways that you could change an organism in a way that would reduce or increase absolute fitness while having no impact at all on reproductive fitness. So those are really 2 separate ideas. For example, I'll give one example of that. Let's say that you alter my genes so that my maximum lifespan is reduced by 10%. So I live 10% fewer years. So that would be a reduction in my absolute fitness because I'm now less healthy, less robust. I have a shorter lifespan. but it's almost certainly not going to represent a reduction of my reproductive fitness. Very few people actually have children in the very, very latter part, the last 10% of their life. So reducing my lifespan by that amount would not affect my reproductive fitness at all, but it would be a reduction in my absolute fitness. Now, my opponent has written, if a mutation is invisible to natural selection, then by definition, it cannot be deleterious. A deleterious mutation, by definition, is one that reduces reproductive fitness. But I hold that that is actually an oversimplification of this idea of fitness. He's only looking at one side of the coin, reproductive fitness. But we have a bigger picture to look at. And Dr. Kimura, one of the founders of neutral theory, Dr. Tomoko Ota as well, these scientists have come up with these ideas that they call neutral theory, but they're actually prevalent now. They are the prevailing view in population genetics. And at its core, this idea of neutral theory is a repudiation of my opponent's oversimplified idea of fitness. So that actually brings us then to our final or third premise. And that third premise is, there are no strictly neutral mutations, but there exists a class of mutations called effectively neutral, aka nearly neutral, whose effects are too subtle to be seen by the process of natural selection and are therefore free to accumulate in populations over time. I'm going to skip down to citation number 7, which is actually the seminal work in population genetics, where Dr. Kimura laid out and actually gave us a chart of his model of mutations and their distribution of fitness effects. And what he says is, he says, note that even if the frequency of strictly neutral mutations is 0 in the present model, a large fraction of mutations can be effectively neutral. Now, what does he mean? What is this difference between strictly and effectively neutral? I submit that is the difference between absolute and reproductive fitness. He says, under the present model, effectively neutral, but in fact very slightly deleterious mutants or mutations accumulate continuously in every species. The rate of loss of fitness per generation may amount to 10 to the negative 7 per generation. Now, Dr. Sanford thinks that's an underestimation. But he writes, whether such a small rate of deterioration in fitness constitutes a threat to the survival and welfare of the species, not to the individual, is a moot point. Of course, he says it's a moot point because for him, evolution is taken for granted. But this will easily be taken care of, he says, by adaptive gene substitutions that must occur from time to time, say once every few hundred generations. Now, this is an important quote because you can see here, Dr. Kimura said that a mutation can be effectively neutral and yet cause a loss of fitness at the same time. If all we're looking at is reproductive fitness, that doesn't really make any sense. And I don't believe he does anything in this quote or in that paper at all to substantiate his claim that these mega beneficial mutations that occur so rarely that he didn't even model them would actually be capable of doing what he's claiming. So we can deal more with this as the debate goes on, but I argue that Kimura just throws that speculation out at the end as a sort of rescuing device, but he doesn't do anything to support that claim. And I do believe I'm out of time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that opening there, Paul. Very clear, concise.
So you can see there, guys, the difference between reproductive fitness and absolute fitness, or strictly neutral mutations and effectively neutral. These are very important differentiations and distinctions to make that the evolutionists fail to make. It's a very unsophisticated and overly simplistic view that the evolutionists have. Okay, so that's why all their arguments, essentially, that we've covered today in 3 hours have failed. And guys, thanks so much for sticking it out with me for 3 hours. We touched on a ton. I could probably break this up into 3 parts with the independent origins in the beginning, the ERVs in the middle, and now genetic entropy at the end. So thanks for sticking it out with me, Baptist Chad, brother. Email, I'll shoot you an email. Doki, thanks for the links. I'm going to screen share one last thing, guys, for anybody who might have just got here. Check out our new articles over here, creationsclothing.com. Eventually, so this is our home webpage for now. Eventually, we'll probably get a secondary one, but go to our article section, guys, and check out the 2 articles I just published in the last 2 days. This one, Neanderthals and Independent Origins, guys, going into the Neanderthals and the phylogenetics in great detail, as well as patriarchal drive. So here it is, guys. Tons of good information in there for you. And the one I just published today on refuting the critics on Adam and Eve. So this one you'll really enjoy as well. You'll find a lot of the common arguments from the critics. Even goes into some replacing Darwin stuff, guys, with some good sources for you. So check that out, guys. Once again, thanks so much. Hope you guys had a good stream. I definitely had a blast. I didn't know 3 hours could fly by. Brother Montaz, you can finally get some sleep. I'm going to go get a few hours of sleep, and then I have a busy day. I want to say tomorrow, but no, it's pretty much today as well. So the fun begins. Power nap is what it's going to be, guys. But I wanted to get this done for a few days now. And like I said, lots to look forward to leading up to Christmas and for the new year, guys. So God bless. Share around. Doki Doki, thank you so much for the last minute coffee. So God bless everybody who's just getting up. Enjoy your day, including you, Dan. Thanks for joining us. You have a good day as well. Have a coffee for me or a tea. Speed, you have a coffee for me as well. Maybe one of your morning reports. I like those morning reports. Lena, God bless. Always a pleasure. Luca. All right, guys. SFT is out, and we will talk tomorrow. Bless.